Wait, please intervene if you can't see my slides, but otherwise I assume that
Perfect. Everything is perfect. I see and can hear, and the slides are on screen now. Thank you.
fantastic. Perfect. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for being here. And Gueda, I'm super excited to work with you. So just to set the stage for everyone, what we're talking about here is when governments, public agencies engage with private companies. And we're interested in particular on innovation initiatives. And we've talked over the past couple of sessions about lots of different ways that the public sector and private sector interact. But here, what we're really focused on is getting really important work done that can't be done any other way other than by working together across sectors. We have a framework for thinking about the range of issues that are in play here that begins with a compelling aspiration. We talked about this in context last time of bringing electronic medical records from a private organization called Baobab to the public sector in Malawi to diagnose HIV cases and manage the care of HIV patients. And the compelling aspiration there is to save lives and to prevent transmission of HIV. But the real focus on who we're creating value for in that example, the second element of our framework, was on doctors and nurses specifically. And the way that we achieved and demonstrated excellence was by reducing the workload associated with actually delivering care. And that required these unique resources and capabilities that ranged all the way from stable electricity to the ability to track down patients that had lapsed from their appointment schedule. And we sustained that excellence by giving control over this project to the Ministry of Health, the local Ministry of Health, over time once it was proven. So this kind of complete range of questions needs to be answered consistently in order to turn disasters into triumphs, to turn problems into opportunities, and to actually sustain excellence. And that's our focus today, is to move to sustainability. And I'm just going to stop for a second and just check in with Agueda. I hear a little bit of a movement in the background. Are there any questions already? Are we on a good track so far?
No questions so far. So
okay.
Everything right. Will just mute me also.
Mute yourself. Fantastic. Don't hesitate to unmute and intervene. Anybody who has a question, please just don't hesitate. Just jump right in here. So I'm going to sort of turn to this complicated issue of sustainability by asking us to reflect for a second on this problem that we have, which is that the whole enterprise of corporate engagement is stuck. So you may have heard of a movement for corporate social responsibility, which we abbreviate CSR, and also a movement for what we call ESG, which stands for environmental, social, and governance accountability in the private sector. Sometimes you hear about ESG investing here. Let me just give you a little bit of background on this. So, years ago, decades ago, we used to think about charitable giving by corporations, companies, for example, donating to charities that were prevalent in the communities where they were headquartered. Over time, questions emerged about whether companies could do more. And we moved to this issue of corporate social investment, or corporate responsible investing, where companies were expected to bring their best capabilities, not just their money, but their best capabilities to charitable causes in their communities. For example, in Boston, which is where Agueda and I sometimes hang out, local companies like Gillette and Bank of America used to use their capabilities in the community to try to teach people. For example, Bank of America would run programs to teach people how to save, or how to use their credit cards responsibly. So the goal was to move beyond just giving money to charitable causes, but then to invest. And then we moved into this idea of corporate return on investment. Corporations were supposed to measure the impact that they were having by investing through these sort of engagements. And then they were supposed to put shareholders front and center. And all of this has led to some problems. We're a corporation, corporate social responsibility and ESG now. There is a sort of a movement that the archetype for which was the 2019 Business Roundtable Declaration that companies in general should have a stakeholder orientation, that that companies should be focused on trying to create value for their customers, employees, communities, as well as their investors, and not just try to improve the wealth of their shareholders. And this got cemented by a very famous declaration by the CEOs of 208 or 181 different companies initially, and that number increased to the 250 different CEOs that promised that instead of trying to serve only their shareholders, they were going to try to serve their communities. And this has led to some problems. And I want to just give you a little bit of a sense of what some of these problems are by showing you a little video of a conversation that I had with a friend of mine named Veet Hennish. Veet is the head of ESG and corporate social responsibility curriculum and research at Wharton, which is, by some accounts, the world's #1 business school. And he and I had a brief conversation about this a couple of weeks ago, and I want to show you a short clip from it. And then as you listen to this, I want to ask you to listen for what he says are the problems with the controversies that have led to controversies around ESG, or environmental, social, and governance, investing, and corporate social responsibility initiatives like the Stakeholder Initiative by the Business Roundtable. Asking you about why ESG is so controversial. It seems to me to be a very simple and straightforward idea about the corporation's roles in society. Why is there so much controversy and backlash about this?
Well, I think it's become controversial for a couple of reasons. Some of them are positive, and some of them are more troubling. In one aspect, the fact that we were starting to get data on companies' environmental performance, on the externalities they were posing on society, and investors were.
Oh, so sorry. Let me keep asking you controversy and backlash about this.
Well, I think it's become controversial for a couple of reasons. Some of them are positive, and some of them are more troubling. In one aspect, the fact that we were starting to get data on companies' environmental performance, on the externalities they were posing on society, and investors were taking note of that, was viewed as a threat by firms whose business model is to profit for shareholders by harming stakeholders. And so there was some funding by heavy polluters of a disinformation campaign, a counter movement to attack ESG. And I think that's a political problem, but intellectually, kind of substantively, it's a good thing, right? It was actually having meaning. It was having impact. Now, there are other challenges which are understandable more or less, but maybe harder to manage at the same time. There's some people on the progressive left who think that having the financial service industry trying to take these issues into account is a distraction. And what we should really be focused on is government regulation. And so they're also piling on to the attacks on ESG, but not saying that we shouldn't be doing this, or we shouldn't be having this data, or it's a problem. Really saying this isn't enough. This is a deadly distraction or a dangerous distraction, and we really want government regulation. I don't disagree that we need more regulation, but I think good regulation comes from good data, and so I think I find that the attacks from the left more difficult to navigate because I empathize with the goal, but I disagree on the mean.
I'm going to stop this there. So what is he saying? Can you throw into the chat? What is he saying? Why is it so hard for companies to get agreement that their engagement with public problems is a good idea? So
I
Jillian has some good points and has a good point there over disagreement about the mandate. Absolutely. That was Veet's overall arching thing. There's a disagreement over the mandate. Lots of stakeholders, Chloe is saying, absolutely. But what's the problem? So you've got this idea that corporations should do good works. Corporations should care a lot about their employees and their customers and should work on that. Could that issue, the question I asked Professor Hennish from from the video, how could that be a bad idea? Like, why is that? Why is that controversial? Tawana, would you mind unmuting and making your point, please? Tawana? I don't know.
I don't know. I'm just looking for you, Tuana.
Oh.
Okay, here you are. Okay.
Okay.
Unmuted.
Hi. Yes. So there's, to me, there's always some sort of, I guess you could say, conflict between public interest versus, for lack of a better term, capitalization. Because many times they tend to be, or people perceive them to be total opposites. That's
Yeah.
my.
Very good. I'm going to ask Jessica Margolin, please, to mute. If you don't mind, Jessica, thank you so much. I'm sorry for bothering you there. Erica, what did you want to add?
I believe that there are a lot of social aspects, such as like religion and culture, that can play a role. You see that a lot in the media now, where there are two different sides to a story, and people are so emotionally involved, where people just take your ideas and don't understand them, and that could actually hurt a business, such as Starbucks. We see Starbucks lost a lot of money through their campaign with Israel. So I think that sometimes it can be a bad thing.
That's absolutely. I mean, the level of controversy over whether corporations should be trying to maximize their profits versus whether they should be trying to sort of invest in social clauses is so deep and so political. And this is what Veet is saying in that video, that you're getting attacks from the right and attacks from the left. It's becoming amplified into religion. Very, very challenging for a leader in a company to find a route forward to do this kind of work as a consequence. Absolutely. Anybody else? Marina, I see you unmuted your video. I didn't know that means you want to intervene.
No, I didn't. No, I'm good. Thank you.
You're
Anita.
good. Well, we have a lot of great comments in the chat about how it's not profitable and so on. Let me see how this, if I can summarize a little bit some of the things that Veet said in the hope that this is useful to you here. What he's saying is there's a backlash from all sides. Just to pick up on what Eric and Tawanda said. So if you think about ESG and corporate social responsibility really as, corporations in the middle, getting stuck trying to think about how do we support our communities. From the left, this looks like companies are trying to stop regulators from intervening. And by saying, look, we can self-regulate. We can take care of this. We got this. You don't have to come in and try to prevent us from being bad agents. I mean, Veet goes as far as to say, exploit stakeholders. Our business model, our way of making money is by exploiting stakeholders. You know what? We'll take care of it. Don't come in and regulate us. We'll take care of it. So from the left, you're getting criticism that that's not going to work. That companies are so shareholder oriented, so profit oriented, that anything else is insincere. It's not robust. It's not even really possible for companies to do this. We have to regulate. From the right, you're getting a couple of different criticisms. The financial services industry, as Veet says, this is a threat. and they're saying, look, we got this, we're on this, don't intervene. This is a threat to our legitimacy. Regulation is poisonous to true engagement by companies. The more you regulate us, the more we're going to resist you. So that's one set of criticisms. And the other is that ESG reporting and CSR reporting are just distractions. Capitalism is good for society. It enhances prosperity. And all the reporting you're asking us to do is on bad data, and it's distractions, and it's just causing activists to show up at our front door and prevent us from doing our business. Okay, so the problem here is exactly this problem that Eric alluded to, which is that it's become so controversial, ESG and CSR, that it's virtually, we're really stuck and not making very much progress. It's very hard for CEOs to do well. Many of you may have heard of this thing called greenwashing and social washing. It's this idea that companies will issue reports or make statements that are insincere. They're just designed as marketing tools. They're just designed as PR. And there's this great paper by the authors that's cited at the bottom here, including one of my students, Leandro Ponzalupe, called 50 Shades of Green, a new toolkit here. And what these authors do is they analyze the pixels, the color of the pixels in corporate social responsibility reports and annual reports. And they find that the more green that's being used and the darker the green that's being used, the more greenwashing is occurring. In other words, the more that these companies that are behind these reports are actually making out that they're doing more than they're actually doing. Like, sort of putting a marketing spin on what they're doing without really doing very much here. So the function of these CSR executives, CSR initiatives is not always to actually do CSR. Here at the business school here in Toronto, we have companies that will show up with and say that they're doing corporate social responsibility initiatives, and they're trying to save the environment. They're trying to, improve the lives of the poor. Really, what they're trying to do is get the students to become employees. They're trying to recruit employees because young people really care about these things, or they're trying to legitimize their entry into a community by saying, "Hey, we're good social citizens. We're gonna be good for the community. We're gonna be pro-poor innovators in the community. You should give us tax breaks and licenses to do work here." Yeah. Or they're trying to satisfy their local constituents, telling the mayor, telling the governor that we're good local partners and you should trust us. This is about marketing and branding our products. It's about getting access to resources. It's about developing a good reputation that can be a buffer so that when we're caught polluting, that, we are not held responsible for that because we actually have been strong contributors to the community. And, sometimes we're compensating for mistakes. So, we say, okay, we built bad products in the past that have caused injuries. We're going to try to compensate for that by doing some pro-poor innovation or something that's good for the community now. There's this skepticism that we're not really trying to improve environmental social outcomes, that corporations are actually at the opposite end of the spectrum, as Tawanda said, from what the government is trying to achieve. So there's a lot of need to reinvent corporate social responsibility, reinvent ESG. I see notes there from Jessica. Thank you, Jessica, for joining here, talking about the evolution of financial reporting, about protecting investors. It's more, she asked this question, is there research on what investors are using in their models, especially fund managers? Yeah, there is. And it's Veet Henish is somebody who's done a lot of research in this area, and he's saying we need better data. Companies tend to report on metrics where their performance is good and not on metrics where their performance is bad. I know you're not surprised by that, Jessica, right? You're not surprised by that.
I am not surprised by that. Thank you. And Veet Henish, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with him.
That was the fellow who I just showed the interview with.
Oh,
Veet Henish is the guy who I just was talking to.
I'm so
the-
sorry. Thank you. I appreciate
No
that.
problem. He's the head of ESG curriculum and research at Wharton. He's the vice dean of ESG, and he's a friend of mine. And I interviewed him along with several other luminaries in our field on reinventing CSR. How are we going to reinvent CSR so that we can get real work done, across the private and public sectors along the lines that we've been championing in the last couple of lectures? And that's what the Pi Squared project is about that Equata mentioned at the beginning. Pisquared.burncenter.org is a project that I'm leading at the Burn Center on how can we reinvent corporate social responsibility to get past this crazy impasse that we're at and to really do better work. So let me give you a little bit more of a sense of where we're going with that agenda here. I want to show you another piece of. To give us an example of this is an interview with Sarah Kaplan, who's a professor at Toronto. She has led the Institute for Gender in the Economy here at the Rotman School and achieved considerable success at this. And this is another a piece of video in which I ask her to give some examples of really authentic engagement by companies with this agenda of constructive social impact, of acting in the public interest. Of how stakeholder transformation works and what kinds of opportunities it can create for companies that want to try to contribute constructively to the communities that they're entering.
So let me start with something that doesn't sound very much like stakeholder consultation at all. Many companies are either required to or feel an obligation to do environmental, social, and governance reports, or corporate sustainability reports, or corporate social responsibility reports. And very often those reports are seen as PR activities. Like, we have to do this because we have to represent, position ourselves in some way to the external community. And to me, that is a hugely missed opportunity, because if you do it right, you actually learn a lot about yourself that can help, you can inform your own processes. And one example that I call out is Nike. If you look at their sustainability report, there's a lot of soul searching in it. There's a lot of reporting things that, for example, where their factories didn't perform the way that they hoped that they would from a environmental standpoint or from a worker well-being standpoint. They didn't achieve some targets when it came to reducing the use of cotton, or reducing shipping pollution impacts and things like that. There's a lot of soul searching in there, and the soul searching, I think, is the whole purpose of doing disclosure. Yes, you need it so that investors or other stakeholders know what goes on. But if you treat it just as, I'm going to give my best face to stakeholders, you're going to miss out on this big opportunity to actually learn. So that is an example of a way that organizations, if they really were to engage with stakeholders, they would treat it like a learning process. And the same thing with these community benefits agreements that many companies are negotiating with Indigenous communities. Done well, those are these deep engagements that continue over time with communities as they jointly learn together and try and create benefits for the Indigenous communities and give access to whatever mineral that they're trying to mine or whatever. So these are examples of, again, done well. These are all practices that are out there, but not always done in a way in the spirit of the things that I'm talking about, which is really trying to understand and deeply engage. And then once you do that deep engagement, all kinds of things could come out of that would, lead to greater insights. I was thinking of an example. I was just reviewing an example today of MRI machines being used in hospitals. And one of the challenges is for kids. Lots of kids, sick kids, need MRIs, but it's super scary and traumatizing for them and can be, lifetime traumatic effects and things like that. And so there was this big community engagement, including designing with children, to come up with a different way of dealing with it. And this one hospital created an MRI machine that looks like a space rocket. They had the kids, like, they made it like a fun ride at an amusement park. So then the kids were like, wanted to go, and they would finish the MRI and they would want to come back the next day because the MRI was like being in a space rocket. So that's an example.
So here's what I want to say to you, and I hope this is helpful to you. You should be super skeptical whenever companies want to work with you. We should be worried as a first order of business that companies are not going to be able to sustain and really engage over time with the public interest, that they're under so much pressure to do something on CSR or ESG that somebody in marketing or somebody in PR has been assigned to this. And and yet we know that we have to work with companies in order to get a lot of problems solved. So what we're learning through the Pi Squared initiative is you've got to build these really authentic kind of conversations, these ways of thinking that lead to a very deep kind of commitment from companies to learn and to sustain their connection in ways that are safe for them to consider. And that idea of corporate social responsibility at a level that's really meaningful it involves innovation in the business activities of the partners that we serve. It's innovation through stakeholder engagement. So it's not just, a retail grocery store doing an end of aisle display on healthy beverages. It's really learning from customers on the cultural backgrounds, let's say, in a particular community that are leading people to make choices about what beverages they purchase, and understanding that cultural background and creating an experience that leads to innovation in, let's say, a culturally significant beverage that is going to be popular in some communities that can be enhanced so that it's healthier. So you're not asking people to drink more water and not to drink more of some heritage beverage that comes from a country of origin. You're actually recrafting the way a beverage is presented so that it is both healthier and culturally relevant to the community that you're trying to serve. You're recrafting or redeveloping the process of doing an MRI for a child so that the child wants to have the MRI. The experience is better for the parent, for the technician, and you learn more about what the child's physiology is in the process. So it's innovation, and then sustaining that innovation requires being excellent, creating that kind of value creation flywheel that we discussed with the Malawi example, where you get learning over time that makes you efficient, and your routine becomes more effective, and you become truly great at what you do in that administration of that MRI to that child, so that you get efficiency and better data and better information from the family about what the child's health needs are through the entire experience of administering an MRI. So you're not just putting out a corporate social responsibility report as a company that says, hey, we painted our MRI machine to look like a space rocket. You're actually learning from the child and from the family through the whole process of administering that MRI about what's going on there. And that leads us to sort of an experience of the way that companies are engaging with public servants like you to really deliver excellence. And this is my last piece of video. It's from a Northeastern professor named Sermina Karim that's been working on the delivery of a super innovative educational program in Central America that was built over time by a group of really committed corporate leaders from the UK in country, and they worked very deeply over time to create this kind of sustainable excellence that I'm describing. So let me see if we can hear from Samina here.
Yeah, I do. And I think you're pointing out two things. So one is you sometimes have to start somewhere. And so where this organization started, because they couldn't initially just walk into a public school, right? So what they started, they said, well, we're going to buy some land, we're going to build a community center, and we're just going to offer, a camp in the summers and after schools, whoever, if children want to come with their parents, we're going to teach literacy, Spanish literacy, and the English language. And so at first it's just whoever wants to come will come. But then as the community saw that, wait, the children here are learning, this organization isn't going anywhere, they're getting to know us, they live here, right? The director lives here. You start to form those bonds of trust. And I think, again, this idea, trust is very important, again, for this idea of being non-threatening and showing how you're complementing one another. And then this notion of getting to know the community leads to getting to know the mayor, getting to know the teachers in the community. And then what you mentioned, the second thing, Anita, is you need a champion, right? So in the government organization, so here it's the public schools in these towns, we're in Dominican Republic and in Nicaragua, that you need to have champions who see the potential for these complementarities of these organizations working together, the public and the private sector. And I think that's really important, because you need someone in some sense who can translate for the government side or the local community for whom this NGO is new, the value added and that trust factor. So I think that's very important to have those champions.
Amazing. Samina, this is so inspiring. I can't help but ask you, is that Belize or Nicaragua or someplace
Neither.
else?
I wish this is neither.
Well,
this is Barbados.
Oh, well, wonderful. Can I ask, do you have any final thoughts you want to leave us with before we say goodbye?
So, when you and I first spoke, we mentioned how can corporations solve public problems, right? That was kind of a general question. Something that we all care about is solving these big problems, challenges that we have. And, the two that I've just mentioned in these organizations are education and really caring for those, in this case, children who are, impoverished or without resources. And I think one of the problems that we have is by calling them public problems, sometimes it makes people think of government as being the institution or the body that should solve these problems. I think we should just erase that from our language and call it societal problems, because I think this idea that we're all responsible for trying to solve the problems that we have is something that should kind of permeate through our private sector and not be, limited to this idea of that it's a public sector problem. So I want to rename things societal problems. I think that'll maybe get across this idea that in the private sector as well, we need to look at these problems and try to help solve them, and not just keep it contained to or dependent upon our governments and the public sector to do it all alone.
So, so what she's saying again is you're not dealing with, in a sense, you're not dealing with the whole corporation or the whole NGO. You're dealing with the individuals that are showing up at the doorstep, and you've got to make sure that those individuals are as personally committed as possible to collaborating with you as an individual to lead to success on both sides. A recipe for disaster, and a couple of weeks ago, we talked about one of them in Toronto here, where Google came in and promised to rebuild the waterfront, and it was a complete failure. The whole thing ended up with nothing happening other than a lot of people wasting a lot of money. The recipe for disaster is focusing on who's going to pay, focusing on the implications for the corporation as a whole, focusing on the marketing and PR events that are surrounding the collaboration. A recipe for disaster is for us in the public sector to not understand the internal incentives of the people that you're dealing with, and to fall prey to fatuous promises, and to be victim of a lack of authentic engagement and trust building as a priority. Whereas a recipe for being successful, a recipe for triumph, is to say, look, the organization's success is secondary. In some sense, if we can't accomplish this through my company, or if we can't accomplish this through my NGO, then, we'll find some other way to do it. The relationships are forming over time. They become trusting. You get early small wins that amplify into bigger wins over time. The individuals that you're dealing with have a personal commitment to working on this problem, and profitability becomes relevant later for efficiency rather than the central motivation for the innovation. In other words, it's only when you get past innovation and into trying to sustain the excellence that you start thinking about profitability. Profitability is secondary. What's motivating the innovation is the opportunity to do something personally important in the community. So what we're doing with this Pi Squared initiative that I've been describing on private innovation in the public interest is trying to reinvent corporate social responsibility and ESG to overcome politics, to overcome greenwashing, achieve this kind of incentive alignment by doing small things that can become examples of what's possible at scale, proving the value. Then you get companies involved later to try to be efficient at this, to achieve scale and to organize and become sustainable as governance mechanisms over time. But you don't get the corporation really broadcasting what they're doing until later in the process. And I put into the documents here the website with these these conversations, and with more material on this, more frameworks. You can sign up for newsletters and get more involved in our conversations about this over time. But what we're looking for is great collaborations between people that really want to work together to get important things done. So let me pause there and see if there are any other questions or comments, Agueda.
Yes, there's one question for Julia. It says, are there models that are working? E.j. Patagonia, the Tompkins Conservation was a spin-off of sale of North Face and Spirits. That's one of the previous questions. So, and all the others, please write your question on the chat, and so we have a chance to answer it with Anita. So
I'm interested in disasters too. If any of you have worked with companies in ways that just got diluted or watered down, problems emerged, the whole thing kind of lay fallow or didn't come to anything, I'm interested in hearing about that too. There are models that work. Yes, Patagonia is a famous example, Natura as well. What I love about the Thompson's Conservation example is that North Face and Spirit, which are for-profit companies, said, hey, we may never make money at this, so we're going to do a spin out of it. We're going to create an NGO, and we're just going to... Organizations are tools for getting things done. If the profit model can't get aligned behind something, let's create another organization and do it in a different way. And that was a super smart way to get something done. Erica, please unmute and offer your thought.
I was actually in Puerto Rico recently, and I noticed since Hurricane Maria, there hasn't been a lot of improvement to the infrastructure there. So I'm surprised that there aren't a lot of nonprofit organizations getting people there on the ground and willing to help.
And do you have a theory as to why? Do you have an idea as to why?
Maybe there's not enough education about building nonprofits and the opportunities, the grants that are available. I don't think that people know about these opportunities, or we may more likely become involved in doing these things.